We have Dr. Hillary Babcock, WashU infectious disease specialist, chief quality officer at BJC, to talk about this flu that's been going around. People here at the station have it, friends, neighbors. It seemed like everybody I knew seemed to be getting the flu this year. And I asked a friend of mine who oversees the ICU at one of our hospitals affiliated with WashU, and they said, yep, it's been a tough year. So we wanted to hear from you guys directly, Dr. Babcock. How bad of a year has it been for the flu, and is it worse or better in St. Louis than it is in the rest of the country?
Hi. So it's been a pretty bad flu year across the country. I would say here in St. Louis, actually, it hasn't been as terrible as it's been in some other areas in the country, but we are definitely seeing high rates of influenza across our community and coming into our hospitals as well.
Doctor, can you explain this? Can you really get like the flu or influenza by just not being properly dressed when you go outside? We warn that about our kids all the time, but is that really something that's true?
So that's one of those sort of folk wisdom things that it's hard to prove or disprove, but it's caused by a virus. So if you go outside and you're cold, but you aren't exposed to anybody who has that virus and you don't come into contact with that virus, you won't get influenza just from being outside. Same for other viruses. You won't get them just from being outside.
So let's talk about the flu shot. Is it too late to get one? And if we got the flu shot, I know some years I got it, I do every year, but some years the flu that ends up going around is slightly different than the one that we were inoculated against. What's the situation this year?
Yeah, so I'm glad to hear you get it every year. I get it every year as well. And it is not too late to get the flu shot. It takes about 10 to 14 days to get full protection from the flu shot, but the flu usually is circulating in the St. Louis area into March and sometimes into April, so it's definitely not too late to get it. The flu shot has sort of variable protection every year. Every year it does provide some protection, but how much kind of varies. And this year, the flu virus that was circulating in the southern hemisphere mutated a little bit more than it usually does. So it is mutating all the time, but it mutated a little more than usual. And it made that change after the vaccine formulation had already been decided upon and the vaccine had already been made. So that's one of the reasons that we're seeing an increase in flu cases this year, though we also are seeing fewer people get the flu vaccine at all, and that is also contributing to the increase in cases. The flu vaccine does continue to provide protection this year, even though it may not be quite as good as in some years, but particularly provides very good protection against getting very sick from the flu. So even if you do get the flu, you are much less likely to end up very ill or in the hospital or even dying if you have gotten the vaccine.
Are there any drawbacks at all to getting a flu shot?
There really are not. A little sore arm, that's the most common side effect from getting the flu shot, but that's pretty much it. There's really no reason not to get it. And everyone who doesn't want to get the flu or doesn't want to end up in the hospital if they do get the flu, really, I would recommend it to everyone.
Are you seeing this impact children or adults more this year, Dr. Hillary Babcock, WashU infectious disease specialist?
So our case numbers from the county are showing more cases among children than among adults this year.
Ah, interesting. And what are the signs that we should be looking for, right? You talked about sort of old wives' tales, if you will, earlier as it relates to people wearing out, but what they're wearing outside. But a lot of people that get a stomach bug still say, I had the flu this weekend, but they didn't really. They had a stomach bug very different from influenza. But what are the signs of influenza?
Yeah, influenza usually is really a respiratory virus, so it occasionally can have some GI upset, but it's not its primary focus. And so most times when people have influenza, they're going to get a fever, headache, congestion, and they may get body aches. And often when we're trying to decide if is this the flu or is this some other infection, if someone can say, like, I started feeling bad at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that is often influenza. It has a really acute onset. It can start fairly quickly. You could be feeling fine, and then you start feeling terrible. And people often describe feeling like they got hit by a bus. They are exhausted, and they ache all over, and they have a fever and headache, and they just feel pretty crummy.
Okay, Dr. Babcock, I have a question. should we actually avoid shaking hands with people as often as possible? Or what's your take on that? Is that a wise tale?
If you are shaking hands with people, then it's very important that you wash your hands frequently or use hand sanitizer frequently. And I'm fine with people sort of waving and not shaking hands as much, particularly during viral seasons.
And then let's talk, if we would, about Tamiflu, right? I've heard you have to take it pretty much right after you get that I got hit by a truck feeling that you mentioned a little bit earlier. But if somebody in my house has been diagnosed with influenza, and even if I'm not symptomatic, should I go ahead and start taking Tamiflu as well?
So this is a great question to call your doctor about. If there's someone in your house has influenza, it is true that you need to start soon after symptoms in order to get the most benefit for people who have the flu. And for most people, especially if they're vaccinated, it may not be worth it to take Tamiflu, but if you have risks that put you at increased risk for severe disease, or if you are unvaccinated, if you've had a lot of extensive contact, if you're taking care of a kid who's all snotty and sniffly and coughing all over you, then you may want to consider Tamiflu. So it's really something that you should talk about with your provider.
Final thought. I know this is probably impossible, but let's just say you're a person that cannot afford to get the flu because of your job. Are there any steps at all you can do to reduce the odds of getting it?
Yeah, the most important thing to do is to get the flu shot. The second thing to do is to try to avoid being around people who are sick. And if you have to be in indoor crowded places or traveling, then this is a time when masking can also be really helpful. I still wear a mask most of the time in the winter when I'm flying or when I'm in the airport if you can't get away from other people. And masks can still be very helpful to prevent infection if you really just can't afford to get sick, and no one wants to get sick.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Doctor. Honored to have you on.
Great. Thanks for having me.